Audiobooks and beyond.
The Graduation Maze. Narrated by Mike Walters. The last car pulled away, its taillights shrinking to 2 red pinpricks before vanishing around the bend. The celebratory shine of his parents' graduation party had faded, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than the party itself. Alex stood on the porch, a lone sentinel under the dim, flickering bulb. He had been a graduate for a few hours, a new chapter supposedly beginning, yet the old one felt like a thick, unbreakable chain around his neck. He stepped inside, and the air hit him, stale, with a cloying scent of forgotten pizza, day-old cake, and something else he couldn't place. It was the scent of a room left too long, of an old, deep silence. The living room was a ghost of its former self, streamers hanging like forgotten party ribbons, and plastic cups scattered like colorful, mocking confetti. He called out, "Mom? Dad?" But his voice was swallowed, not by the size of the house, but by an absolute, profound stillness. Even the low hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen was gone. He needed water, a return to normalcy. He turned toward the hallway, the familiar gallery of his life. Photos lined the walls, his 2 front teeth missing, a family vacation to the beach, his awkward prom photo from last year. But as he walked, he felt the floorboards shift under his feet, groaning with a sound he had never heard before. The hallway seemed to stretch, pulling him forward into a subtle, disorienting distortion. When he reached the end, he didn't find the kitchen. Instead, he was in another living room, but this one was smaller, colder, and filled with furniture he'd never seen. A floral couch sagged under a layer of dust. An old television sat in the corner, and a single unblinking image of a front door was frozen on its screen. The air in this room was frigid and clammy. A jolt of pure dread shot through him, but his mind immediately fought back, trying to force logic onto the impossible. It's a dream. It has to be. The thought was fleeting, dismissed by the cold sweat on his brow and the genuine ache in his legs from hours of standing. Maybe Mom and Dad moved some furniture for the party and I'm just disoriented? He shook his head, looking around at the unfamiliar room. No, this was not his house. It has to be a joke. His parents had always been a little goofy. Maybe they'd put up a temporary wall and an old stage set to surprise him. He laughed, a short, hollow sound. That was it. A post-graduation prank. He backed out slowly, his heart hammering, but now with a mix of fear and annoyance. He turned back down the hallway, now desperately looking for any familiar landmark that would prove his theory right. He saw the photos, the ones he'd always known, but now they seemed to be watching him, their faces frozen in a happy time that felt like a lifetime ago. He ran, and when he reached the end of the hall, he was back in the party's aftermath. The exact same mess, the same streamers. The laughter died in his throat. He ran for the front door, the very one that had been his gateway to the outside world just an hour ago. He grabbed for the knob, but his hand closed on nothing. The door was gone. The space it occupied was now a seamless wall of dark, unblemished wood. He frantically clawed at it, his nails scraping on the hard surface, but there was no seam, no crack. It was as if the door had never been there. His breath came in ragged, panicked gasps. He spun in a frantic circle, his eyes darting around the living room, trying to make sense of the chaos. The cups and plates on the floor suddenly looked like a million tiny, mocking eyes. The streamers seemed to coil and writhe, like an impossibly long net woven to trap him. He stumbled over a scattered stack of gifts and felt a sharp, humiliating jab of panic as he realized they were for him, for a future he might never have. He kicked one away, the sound of the plastic wrapper crumpling in the stillness of the room sounding like a gunshot. His mind, once so quick to find a rational explanation, was now racing 1,000,000 miles an hour in the wrong direction, lost in a labyrinth of terror. He had to get out. He had to find another way. He scrambled to the nearest window and tore back the curtains. The glass was thick and dark, and beyond it, he could see not his front yard, but another room. A sterile bathroom with a chipped porcelain tub and a mirror that showed a blurred reflection not of him, but of a figure with their face buried in their hands, as if in inconsolable grief. His heart pounded against his ribs, a frantic, drum-like beat, He stumbled away from the window, his mind screaming. He ran. He ran blindly, flinging open doors and crashing into rooms. He found his parents' bedroom, but the bed was made with unfamiliar quilts. He ran through it, found a door and opened it to a room he hadn't seen before, filled with boxes of old toys and faded portraits of people he didn't recognize. He ran from that room, his panic rising. The scent of forgotten cake in the air was now overpowering, making him feel sick. He found a dining room, the table still set for a graduation dinner, but the food on the plates was unnervingly fresh, as if the party had just begun. He ran past it, his breathing becoming shallow and ragged. He was no longer trying to find a logical path. He was simply trying to escape the repetition, the subtle wrongness of it all. Each new room was a new punch to the gut, a new piece of evidence that this was a trap. The walls seemed to lean in, the ceiling to press down. The silence was a presence, a living thing that watched him, knowing his every move was a useless effort. This wasn't just a house. It was a prison built from his own memories, an endless, twisting maze. He began to run again, fueled by a terror that was growing with every step. He sprinted through an infinite parade of rooms that were subtly wrong. A guest room with a single, perfectly wrapped graduation gift on a desk. A study that looked just like his father's, but all the books were blank. A child's room filled with toys from his youth, but each one was slightly broken or deformed. Hours melted into a timeless nightmare. The silence of the house was punctuated only by his own ragged breathing and the frantic pounding of his heart. He tried to break the endless cycle, to find a pattern, a logical path. But every turn, every door, every decision seemed to lead him only to another variation of the same trap. The house was not just a maze. It was a hungry thing, feeding on his confusion and fear. The air grew thicker with dust and the smell of rot, the walls seeming to lean in again, this time closer, as if to listen. Eventually, exhaustion won. He found a room that was a perfect replica of his own bedroom, the posters on the wall, the unmade bed. The air in here was warmer, thicker. A new door, one he'd never seen before, stood ajar, revealing a dark, narrow closet. He sank to the floor, defeated, closing his eyes. That's when he heard it, the voice of his father, calm and measured, coming from a distant, unseen room. "Your journey starts now," the voice said, a line from the graduation speech Alex had heard earlier. But the words were wrong. They were full of a cruel, mocking certainty. The voice began to repeat the sentence, a rhythmic, eternal promise he knew he could never fulfill. Then, from the new door, a cold gust of air blew in, carrying a whisper that was his own voice, but hollow and ancient. "You never left," it breathed, and the closet door swung fully open on its own. He looked up at the mirror on the inside of the closet door, and his heart stopped. The blurred figure he had seen before was him, but much, much older. His reflection, gaunt and haggard, had a layer of dust on its face that shifted as it turned its head slowly to look at him, its eyes sunken and hopeless. The old man in the mirror raised a hand, his fingers gnarled and covered in cobwebs, and pointed a trembling finger down to the floor at Alex's own feet. Alex looked down and saw, buried in the thick dust and grime of the floor, a framed graduation photo. It was his. The date on the bottom corner, etched in faded ink, was 50 years ago. The old man in the mirror smiled a terrifying, silent smile, and Alex finally understood. He hadn't just gotten trapped. He had been here for decades. He was the maze. And the party, the friends, the future, they had all been a memory replaying on an endless loop. A cruel, final graduation gift from the house he could never leave.